In this video, I'm about to show you 10 steak sauces that make your food taste worse, starting with number 10, Heinz 57 steak sauce. Heinz 57 is one of those bottles that has been sitting on diner tables for generations, so people assume it must be good. That assumption will ruin a perfectly good ribeye faster than you can say well done. The biggest problem with Heinz 57 is that it doesn't know what it wants to be. Is it a steak sauce? Is it a ketchup alternative? Is it a tangy barbecue hybrid? The answer is yes to all three, and that's exactly why it fails at each one. The flavor profile is a chaotic mess of tomato puree, vinegar, raisins, and a laundry list of spices that clash instead of complementing each other. You squeeze it onto a steak, and instead of enhancing the beefy flavor, it buries it under a wave of sweet, tangy, slightly fruity confusion. The texture is also problematic. It's too thick to spread evenly, but too thin to stay where you put it, so it just sort of gloops onto the meat and slides off. Heinz 57 survives on nostalgia and brand recognition, but the product itself is a relic from a time when people didn't know any better. Your steak deserves more than this confused condiment. Let me go deeper here. The raisin paste is the real offender. Who decided that dried grapes belong on a grilled steak? Raisins bring a cloying, almost fermented sweetness that fights with the savory notes of beef instead of supporting them. And the caramel color? That's just there to make the sauce look darker and more serious than it actually is. Without that artificial coloring, Heinz 57 would be a pale brown mess that nobody would touch. The company knows their sauce is flawed, so they hide it behind food dye. Don't be fooled. This sauce makes your steak taste worse, plain and simple. Number 9. A1. Original steak sauce. A1 is the 800-pound gorilla of the steak sauce world, but being popular doesn't make you good. In fact, A1 has trained generations of Americans to accept mediocrity on their plates. The ingredient list reads like a chemistry textbook: tomato puree, distilled vinegar, corn syrup, salt, raisin paste, crushed orange puree, spices, caramel color, dried garlic, and about a dozen other components. That's not a sauce, that's a science experiment. The flavor is overwhelmingly sweet, with a cloying raisin note that has no business being anywhere near a grilled steak. The vinegar is sharp and aggressive, cutting through the meat's natural juices instead of working with them. The texture is thick and pasty, coating your steak in a brown sludge that hides the beautiful crust you worked so hard to achieve. A1 doesn't complement beef. It dominates it, bullies it, and leaves you wondering why you bothered cooking a nice steak in the first place. The only thing A1 is good for is covering up the taste of a poorly cooked, low-quality piece of meat. If that's your situation, fine, but if you actually care about steak, keep this bottle far away from your table. Here's something else to consider. A1 has changed their recipe multiple times over the years, and each change has made the sauce worse. Older versions had more complexity, more spice, more character. The current formulation is a sugar bomb designed to appeal to the lowest common denominator. The company has admitted in investor calls that they've simplified the recipe to reduce costs, so you're paying the same price for a cheaper, inferior product. That's not just bad steak sauce. That's a ripoff. Number 8. Peter Luger steak sauce. Peter Luger is one of the most famous steakhouses in America, so you'd think their bottled sauce would be exceptional. You'd be wrong. This sauce has a cult following among people who have convinced themselves that anything from Peter Luger must be great, but the reality is deeply disappointing. The flavor is thin, watery, and surprisingly bland for a sauce that costs twice as much as A1. The base is tomato and vinegar, but there's no depth, no complexity, no interesting spice notes to speak of. It tastes like someone diluted a cheap steak sauce with water and added a little extra salt to compensate. The texture is runny, so it drips off your steak and pools on the plate instead of clinging to the meat. What's especially frustrating is that Peter Luger clearly has the resources to make a world-class sauce. Their steaks are legendary, their service is impeccable, but their bottled sauce feels like an afterthought, a cash grab designed to separate tourists from their money. Don't fall for the hype. This sauce makes your food taste worse, not better. And here's the kicker. The restaurant itself doesn't even use this bottled sauce on their steaks. They have a house-made table sauce that's completely different. The bottled version is a cheap approximation, licensed to a mass producer, with no oversight from the actual chefs. so you're buying a product that Peter Luger themselves wouldn't serve. That should tell you everything you need to know. Number 7. Leah and Perrin's steak sauce. Leah and Perrin's is famous for their Worcestershire sauce, which is a genuinely great product. Their steak sauce, however, is a different story. It's not that Leah and Perrin's steak sauce is actively terrible, it's that it's aggressively mediocre, which might be worse. When a company with this much condiment expertise puts out a product, you expect something special. What you get is a forgettable brown sauce that tastes like a watered-down version of their Worcestershire with some tomato paste thrown in. The Worcestershire influence is actually the problem. The sauce tastes too much like its famous cousin, which means it brings that distinctive fermented tanginess to the party. That flavor works beautifully in Bloody Marys and on roast beef, but on a grilled steak, it clashes badly. The steak ends up tasting like it was marinated in something it shouldn't have been marinated in. The texture is also on the thin side, so it runs off the meat and leaves you with a puddle of brown liquid on your plate. Leah and Perrin should have stuck to what they know. Their steak sauce is a misfire. To be fair, Leah and Perrin's didn't try to reinvent the wheel here. They basically took their Worcestershire formula, added some tomato puree and sugar, and called it a day. The problem is that Worcestershire sauce is designed for marinades and cocktails, not as a finishing sauce for grilled beef. The anchovy extract and tamarind notes that make Worcestershire so distinctive become overwhelming when concentrated in a steak sauce. You're not tasting steak anymore, you're tasting anchovies. Pass. Number 6. Bullseye Bold Original Steak Sauce. Bullseye built their reputation on barbecue sauce, and their Bold Original is a solid choice for ribs and chicken. But someone at the company decided that steak sauce was a natural extension of the brand, and that someone was wrong. Bullseye steak sauce tastes like someone took their barbecue sauce, removed the smokiness, added extra vinegar, and called it a day. The result is a sauce that has an identity crisis. It's too tangy to be a good barbecue sauce and too sweet to be a good steak sauce. The molasses and brown sugar notes are still there, lurking underneath the vinegar punch, and they create a weird flavor combination that doesn't belong on beef. The texture is thick and sticky, almost like a glaze, which means it doesn't just sit on top of your steak. It clings to it aggressively, refusing to let go. By the time you've finished eating, your entire mouth tastes like bullseye, not like steak. That's not enhancement, that's obliteration. What's particularly annoying is that Bullseye already makes a product called Sweet and Spicy that would work better on steak than this sauce. But they decided to launch a separate product with a similar name, confusing customers and cluttering the shelf. The steak sauce version has none of the smokiness that makes Bullseye barbecue sauce so good. Without that smoke, you're left with a sweet, tangy paste that tastes unfinished. It's like a song missing the chorus. Number 5, Stubbs Steak Sauce. Stubbs is another barbecue sauce brand that tried to jump into the steak sauce game, and the results are similarly disappointing. Stubbs steak sauce has a devoted following among people who apparently don't like the taste of steak. The sauce is heavily spiced, with a strong black pepper kick that overpowers everything else. That might sound good in theory, but in practice, it means every bite tastes like pepper first, beef second, and nothing else third. The vinegar content is also too high, giving the sauce a sharp, almost sour edge that cuts through the meat's fat in an unpleasant way. Good steak sauce should balance acidity with richness. Stubbs just goes for the throat with vinegar and pepper, leaving your palate battered and confused. The texture is medium thick, which is fine, but that's the only positive thing you can say about this sauce. Stubbs makes excellent barbecue sauce. Their steak sauce is a failed experiment that should have stayed in the lab. The real shame is that Stubbs knows how to make good condiments. Their original barbecue sauce is a masterpiece of balance and flavor. So why did they drop the ball so hard on steak sauce? The answer is probably market research. Some focus group probably said they wanted more kick and more pepper, and Stubbs overcorrected. The result is a sauce that's all kick and no nuance. It's the culinary equivalent of a punch in the face. Number 4, Lawry's Steak Sauce. Lawry's is best known for their seasoned salt, which is a pantry staple in millions of American homes. Their steak sauce, unfortunately, does not live up to that standard. The most common complaint about Lawry's steak sauce is that it tastes artificial. There's a weird, almost chemical undertone that lingers on your tongue long after you've swallowed, and no amount of steak can mask it. The flavor is heavily reliant on liquid smoke, which gives the sauce a fake, campfire in a bottle taste that has no subtlety or nuance. It's like someone tried to recreate the experience of a grilled steak using only smoke flavoring and tomato paste, and they got close enough to fool people who have never tasted real smoke. The texture is thin and watery, so it doesn't cling to the meat, and the aftertaste is genuinely unpleasant, leaving a bitter, artificial residue that ruins the next few bites of your meal. Lawry's should stick to salt. Their steak sauce is a miss. Here's a pro tip. If you want to know whether a steak sauce uses real smoke or liquid smoke, look at the ingredient list. Liquid smoke is usually listed as natural smoke flavor or mesquite smoke flavor. Lawry's proudly puts it right there in the ingredients. That's not a mark of quality. That's an admission that they couldn't be bothered to use real smoke. Real smoke comes from actual wood. Liquid smoke comes from a laboratory. The difference in flavor is massive, and Lawry's customers can taste it. Number 3, Dale's Steak Seasoning, Liquid. Dale's is a liquid marinade and seasoning that has a cult following in certain parts of the country, particularly in the South. But just because something is popular doesn't mean it's good. Dale's is basically liquid soy sauce mixed with garlic, spices, and a whole lot of sodium. 1 tablespoon contains nearly 1,000 milligrams of salt, which is almost half your daily recommended intake. Slather this on a steak, and you're basically eating a salt lick. The soy sauce base gives the steak an umami punch that might sound appealing, but the execution is all wrong. The flavor is one-dimensional and overwhelming, turning your beautiful cut of beef into a salty, garlicky mess. The liquid consistency means it penetrates deep into the meat instead of sitting on the surface, so you can't even scrape it off. Once Dale's touches your steak, there's no going back. The company calls it a seasoning, but it's really a flavor bomb designed to mask cheap meat. If you're cooking a quality steak, Dale's is the last thing you should reach for. And let's talk about the health implications. 1,000 milligrams of sodium per tablespoon is dangerous territory. The American Heart Association recommends no more than 2,300 milligrams per day, with an ideal limit of 1,500. 2 tablespoons of Dale's put you over the daily limit before you've eaten anything else. That's not just bad for your steak, that's bad for your heart. Dale's should come with a warning label. Number 2, Texas Pete Steak Sauce. Texas Pete is famous for their hot sauce, which is a solid, no-frills option for adding heat to eggs, wings, and tacos. But Texas Pete Steak Sauce is a completely different beast, and not in a good way. The most immediate problem is the heat level. Texas Pete couldn't help themselves, so they added a significant amount of chili pepper extract to their steak sauce. The result is a sauce that brings unnecessary spice to the table, distracting from the beef instead of enhancing it. The vinegar base is also too aggressive, giving the sauce a sharp, almost metallic tang that clashes with the richness of grilled meat. The flavor is thin and hollow, with none of the depth or complexity you expect from a good steak sauce. It's like someone took Texas Pete hot sauce, added a little tomato paste, and called it a day. The texture is runny, so it drips off the steak and creates a mess on your plate. Texas Pete should have stayed in their lane. Their steak sauce is an embarrassment. What's baffling is that Texas Pete already makes a product called Hotter Hot Sauce that would work better on steak. Why they decided to launch a completely separate steak sauce instead of just marketing their existing hot sauce for that purpose is a mystery. The steak sauce version is milder than their hot sauce, but somehow more aggressive in its vinegar profile. It's the worst of both worlds. Not hot enough for heat seekers, too vinegary for everyone else. Number 1, Open Pit Steak Sauce. Open Pit is the absolute worst steak sauce you can buy, and it's not even close. This stuff is a crime against beef. The first thing you'll notice when you open the bottle is the smell. It's not the tangy, savory aroma of a good steak sauce. It's a weird, sweet, almost fruity smell that immediately raises red flags. The taste is even worse. Open Pit is overwhelmingly sweet, with a syrupy consistency that feels more like pancake topping than steak condiment. The ingredient list tells the whole story. High fructose corn syrup is the second ingredient, right after water. That's right, there's more corn syrup in this sauce than there is tomato puree. You're basically pouring sugar water onto your steak. The vinegar is present, but completely overwhelmed by the sweetness, so there's no balancing acidity to cut through the richness of the meat. The texture is thick and sticky, coating your steak in a shiny, sugary glaze that belongs on a donut, not on a ribeye. Open Pit is the steak sauce that people buy when they don't know any better, and they keep buying it because they've never tasted anything else. If you have a bottle of Open Pit in your fridge, do yourself a favor and throw it away. Your steak deserves respect. Open Pit offers none. Let me be blunt, Open Pit isn't just bad steak sauce, it's bad food. The company has been sued multiple times over their labeling practices, and Consumer Reports have consistently flagged their products for containing undeclared allergens. But the real issue is the taste. There's no redemption arc here, no hidden complexity waiting to be discovered, just sweet, syrupy, corn-based sadness in a bottle. Open Pit is the reason people think they don't like steak sauce. Don't let it ruin your meal.